The Jon Jones thing is bull. Ever was Jon Jones even remotely in my mind to fight at the White House. First of all, some guy with meta glasses on filmed him talking about his hips where he can barely run. Doctors say he should have hip replacement. And what was even crazier is Jon Jones came out and was like, I'm in negotiations right now for the White House fight, after I had already sent a text to his lawyer saying, never gonna happen ever.
Is it fair to say then Jon Jones is retired?
Yes, Jon Jones retired because of his hips. He's got arthritis in his hips.
Jon Jones may have thought the UFC White House card would be his way back into the spotlight, but instead it appears to have become another reminder of how dramatically his relationship with Dana White has changed over the last year. As more details continue emerging about the event and the UFC's plans moving forward, there is a growing feeling throughout the MMA community that Jones isn't simply missing out on a fight, he's missing out on what could have been one of the biggest opportunities of his entire career. And judging by the reaction from fans, fighters, and media personalities, the fallout from that decision is only becoming more controversial. What's making the situation so fascinating is that there was a period where the White House card felt almost tailor-made for someone like Jon Jones. Few fighters in MMA history have built their careers around massive moments better than Jones.
I go back and forth on what I think the greatest of all time means, but if you want to say like who dominated his division longer than anybody, who beat everybody that was ever any good in his division, and who never lost, that's Jon Jones. The only time you could say he had a controversial decision was the Dominic Reyes fight. That was Dominic Reyes was coming up, he was in his prime, it was a really good fight, a really close fight, but Jon won what I think was a split decision, and then he had a split decision with Thiago Santos. But the bottom line is Jon won all those fights. He wins the heavyweight title too. It's tough to argue he's not the greatest of all time.
They're talking about a White House fight card? We got to have some Americans win. I don't like Jon Jones. It's no secret. The whole world knows it. I say, man, y'all better put Jon Jones on there. Because right now we ain't got one American in the top 10 pound for pound. I say, if y'all want an American dude to go get a victory, put Jon Jones in there. Because he gonna win. That's what he does.
I just don't know what they could announce where it's the best. He said, these are his words, the best UFC fight card ever. And it doesn't have Conor on there, doesn't have Jon on there, doesn't have Alex up. Like, what stars are you gonna have? So what the hell kind of combination can they come up with that doesn't include Conor, Jon, Alex, Sugar Sean, Kayla, Amanda Nunes, Corey Sandhagen, Bo Nickel? Because if they announce a card of Ilya versus Justin as your main event, that doesn't do it, man.
And you're still saying that Hamzat Sean is like completely off the table?
That's not on this card. They're not going to risk Strickland at the White House.
They have to make it with Jon then, right? They have to.
Has to be Jon.
Whether people loved him, hated him, supported him, or criticized him, there was never any denying his ability to command attention whenever his name entered a conversation. That's why so many people assumed that if the UFC was putting together a historic event on a stage unlike anything the sport had ever seen before, Jones would somehow find his way onto the card. Instead, the exact opposite appears to have happened. The closer the event gets, the clearer it becomes that Dana White has absolutely no interest in building any part of the card around Jon Jones, and for many fans that represents one of the most surprising developments in recent UFC history. Not because Jones suddenly stopped being a superstar, but because there was a time when it would have been almost impossible to imagine the UFC moving forward with a project this important while completely shutting the door on one of the biggest names the company has ever promoted.
There's human beings that have different temperament and different minds and different mentality and a ruthless competitive drive that's almost terrifying to the ordinary person. That guy, if we were living 1,000 years ago, he would be on a horse with the biggest battle axe, waiting in the back, hacking heads off, and everybody would be running. And those people have always existed. These dominators have always existed.
Of course, everybody knows why the relationship became strained. The Tom Aspinall situation changed everything. For years, Jones was viewed as untouchable. He could disappear, return, negotiate, and still find himself at the center of the biggest conversations in the sport. Then came the endless speculation surrounding a fight with Aspinall, a heavyweight champion many fans believed had already waited long enough. As the delays continued and frustration grew throughout the MMA community, public opinion gradually shifted. What once looked like careful career management began looking very different to people watching from the outside.
Interested, and the world shouldn't be interested either, because what's the point? It's false hope.
Literally a week after you become champion and everything seems to be moving in this direction, Donald Trump announces that they're going to the White House. And like a day later, Jon Jones says, I'm back. And now all the talk is, I'm out of retirement, I'm getting tested. Did you chuckle at all this? Did you like, I mean, literally days after all this goes down, he says, okay, I'm back after all. What do you make of all this?
Oh, mate, it's just boring. It's just so boring. I don't even have a comment on it. It's boring as hell. Don't want to talk about it.
Like you just probably rolled your eyes and moved on, right?
I've already got a fight, so I'm focusing on that. That's the way that I like micromanage things so well mentally. Is that like for the next 10 weeks of my life, all I'm thinking about is like Cyril Gane and how to beat him. Like even what you said about his coach, what you said or didn't say, it doesn't matter because I'm fighting Cyril and that's all that matters really. No matter what anybody said or done or what's happened in the past is all pretty irrelevant at this point because we're going to fight each other and that's all that really matters.
And I promise this is the only other thing I'll ask about it, but now it's become Jon versus Tom would be the biggest fight ever at the White House, and even Dana has talked about it, that would be the wish list. Is that something that you even think about or use as like that could be a goal, or because of the past year you won't allow yourself to even get too worked up over that?
Do you want me to be honest?
Please.
It has spent 0 seconds in my mind.
Okay.
That's it. I'm not interested, mate. Not interested. And the world shouldn't be interested either because what's the point? It's just false hope.
What about just you at the White House? Forget about him. Does that interest you?
Not particularly. It doesn't not interest me, but it doesn't really interest me, to be honest. I'm not really fussed where I fight. I'll fight anyway. It doesn't really bother me. It'd be a cool experience, but I'm not like, I feel like the Americans should get the shot at the White House.
Sure. I'm
not American. Trump and the political stance in America doesn't really bother me at all, to be honest. So, yeah, I'm not really like a big Trump supporter, or I'm not against Trump. Like, I don't know anything about American politics. I'm not American. I don't live there. I don't reside there. I don't do anything there apart from pay taxes and fight there. So, really, all of that stuff just is irrelevant to me.
Particularly as Aspinall continued carrying himself professionally, while uncertainty surrounded the biggest fight available in the division. That's where the story becomes far more complicated than many people are willing to admit, because while it's easy to understand why fans became frustrated, it's also worth remembering that Jones was never obligated to approach his career the same way everybody else wanted him to. By the time these conversations were happening, he had already accomplished almost everything possible inside the sport. Championships, title defenses, legendary victories, and a place in virtually every greatest of all-time discussion meant he was operating from a completely different position than most fighters. Whether people agree with his decisions or not, they were still his decisions to make. Unfortunately for Jones, perception matters, and once enough fans became convinced that he was standing in the way of the heavyweight division moving forward, the criticism became impossible to avoid. Every update generated debate. Every interview created another wave of discussion. Every delay strengthened the feeling that the UFC needed to move on, regardless of who was responsible behind the scenes. Eventually, Dana White appeared to reach that exact conclusion. The trust that once existed between Jones and the UFC president suddenly became one of the biggest talking points in MMA. When White openly suggested that he could no longer rely on Jones for an event as important as the White House card, it sent shockwaves through the sport because it represented something nobody would have expected to hear a few years earlier. The UFC had spent years rebuilding Jones, promoting Jones, and turning Jones into one of the most recognizable fighters on the planet. Hearing Dana White effectively admit that confidence had been lost completely changed the conversation. Retirement suddenly became unretirement, and discussions about returning began surfacing again. Many fans immediately assumed the White House card was the motivation. From a purely promotional standpoint, it made perfect sense. The event would have guaranteed enormous attention.
You said Jon Jones called you.
Well, it wasn't a conversation. He reached out to me and apologized, saying, listen, sorry how this all played out or whatever. You know, I want to fight at the White House. I'm serious about that.
Has that changed your view?
No.
No, not at all.
No.
So there's no chance he's going to be.
No, I appreciate him reaching out and doing that, but I need people I can count on for this fight, and I know who they are.
I'll tell you this. They did seriously try to have Jon Jones on this card, and they couldn't get to the number. Now, a lot of people are talking about this fight that fell through. I don't think that that's the fight that fell through last night. That's not what I was told.
Jon Jones has stated publicly he wants to fight at the White House. He tells anyone that'll listen. Even last week he was at the Grammys or some shit like that and speaking about how he's back testing and he's ready to fight at the White House. But Dana seems more stern in not letting him today than I have ever seen him in regards to Jon Jones. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't know that I agree. I think I would let him fight. At the end of the day, when we're fighting at the White House, you want American people that can win. At the end of
The headlines would have written themselves. The possibility of a super fight involving Jones would have instantly elevated an already historic card into something even bigger. Imagine the reaction if Jones had somehow found himself opposite Alex Pereira. Imagine the reaction if the UFC had managed to revisit the Aspinall storyline one final time. Imagine the attention those fights would have generated across the entire combat sports world. That's why some fans still believe the UFC White House card lost one of its biggest potential attractions the moment Jones was removed from the equation. At the same time, there are plenty of people who completely support Dana White's decision. From their perspective, the UFC cannot afford uncertainty around an event of this magnitude. If the promotion is investing enormous resources into creating one of the biggest nights in company history, reliability becomes more important than reputation. Whether somebody is the greatest fighter of all time or a newcomer making their debut, the expectation remains the same. The UFC needs to know that when the moment arrives, the fighter will be there. That argument has become increasingly difficult to ignore, because while Jones may still be one of the biggest stars in MMA, the sport itself has continued moving forward. Alex Pereira has become one of the most talked about fighters on the planet. Tom Aspinall has emerged as the face of the heavyweight division. Ilia Topuria continues generating huge momentum. New stars are arriving while older stars slowly move toward the final chapters of their careers. For the first time in a very long time, it feels like the UFC genuinely believes it can create blockbuster events without relying on Jon Jones, and that might be the most significant part of this entire story. The real controversy isn't that Jones isn't fighting on the White House card. The real controversy is that the UFC seems completely comfortable moving forward without him. For a fighter who spent years sitting at the center of the sport's biggest moments, that's a remarkable shift in power. Whether it's temporary or permanent remains to be seen, but the fact that we're even having this conversation tells you how dramatically things have changed behind the scenes. As the White House card continues taking shape, one question keeps hanging over the entire event. If Jon Jones had never become entangled in the Aspinall controversy, and if trust between him and Dana White had never broken down, would he be headlining the biggest card in UFC history right now? A lot of fans seem to think the answer is yes, which is exactly why this story refuses to go away.